I knew she wanted my husband the very moment I saw her hand linger too long on his shoulder. It was at a quiet Sunday dinner, the kind where laughter usually fills the room and the smell of roasted chicken floats through the house. But that night, my stomach twisted into knots. I watched her eyes, bright, sharp, and daring, lock onto Chris as though I did not exist. She smiled sweetly, but there was venom hiding beneath that sweetness. And Chris, my husband of over 30 years, seemed blinded by it. People talk about betrayal like it is a sudden storm, a thunderclap that catches you off guard, but no. Sometimes betrayal walks in like a gentle breeze, unnoticed until it wraps itself around your throat and begins to choke the very life out of you. That was Amber. She was supposed to be a family friend, almost like a daughter I never had. But I saw it. The way she leaned in too close, the way her laugh curled around my husband's ears, and the way she pretended not to notice me watching. And that night, sitting at my own dining table, I realized something terrifying. Amber was not here for friendship. She was here to destroy me. But she had no idea that I was about to turn the tables. Before I continue, let me pause for a moment to say thank you. To every single one of you watching right now, I appreciate you so much. To all our returning viewers, thank you for standing by this channel. To those who are new here, welcome. I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button because your support is the fuel that keeps this channel alive. Remember to drop your thoughts in the comments as you follow along, and do not forget to share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Now, let us return to where it all began. My name is Helen, and I am 55 years old. I live in a quiet town in Connecticut with my husband, Chris, who is 58. We have built a life together, filled with years of struggles, triumphs, and moments only a long marriage can hold. Chris is calm, steady, and sometimes too trusting for his own good. And then there was Amber. Amber was 29. She was the daughter of one of Chris's late colleagues. After her father passed, Chris felt a sense of responsibility to look after her. She had no siblings nearby, and her mother lived across the country. She often came to our home, joining us for dinner, helping with little chores, and slowly blending into our family life. At first, I welcomed her. I thought she was harmless, sweet even. I knew what loneliness felt like, and I believed we could offer her warmth, stability, and a sense of family. But very quickly, her presence began to feel different. She started arriving uninvited, always when Chris was home. She would bake cookies for him, but not for me. She would compliment his shirts, laugh a little too hard at his jokes, and lean a little too close when she spoke. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just young. Maybe she did not understand boundaries. But then she began to speak about marriage in subtle ways. "Chris, you are so lucky. Not many men know how to treat a woman the way you do," she once said, her eyes glistening as though she had swallowed some hidden truth. I felt my cheeks burn with anger, but Chris laughed it off, too oblivious to see what I saw. The signs kept piling up. One evening, I overheard her on the phone in our guest room. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but I caught fragments. She was talking about how some women do not deserve the husbands they have. She said something about patience, timing, and how the best way to win was to wait until cracks appeared. My blood turned cold. Was she talking about me? I wanted to believe it was my imagination. I wanted to believe she was just a lonely young woman clinging to people who cared for her. But when I walked into my kitchen one night and saw Amber's hand resting lightly over Chris's as they laughed about a story I wasn't part of, something inside me broke. And then, just days later, I found the proof that would change everything. Inside Chris's jacket pocket, tucked neatly where he never thought I would look, was a small folded note. Written in delicate handwriting were the words, "Do not forget what you promised me. She cannot keep us apart forever." My knees almost gave way as the paper trembled in my hands. Amber was not just flirting anymore. She was planning. And my husband was keeping a secret. When I found that note in Chris's jacket pocket, the air in the room thickened around me. I stood frozen, my hand trembling as though it no longer belonged to me. The words echoed in my head. She cannot keep us apart forever. They did not just sting. They ripped something open deep inside me. My first instinct was denial. Surely this was a misunderstanding. Surely my husband, the man who had built a home, raised a family, and held my hand through life's storms, could not possibly be making promises to another woman. But when I confronted Chris that night, the truth revealed itself in a way that was far more cruel than I expected. He did not deny knowing Amber. Of course not. She was practically part of our household now. But when I showed him the note, his eyes darted, his voice stumbled, and his calm composure cracked. He claimed it was nothing, that Amber must have slipped it into his jacket as some kind of joke. A joke? I could hear the panic beneath his words. I could see the guilt hiding in his face. That was when my heart sank. Amber had gotten to him. The days that followed were unbearable. Chris became distant. He would stay longer at work, or so he said. He began guarding his phone, flinching whenever I walked into the room. And Amber, she grew bolder. She came to the house with her hair done, her perfume lingering long after she left, her laughter too sweet and her voice too intimate. It was as if she wanted me to notice, as if she wanted me to crumble under the weight of her intrusion. I remember one evening vividly. I had just finished preparing dinner. The smell of baked salmon filled the kitchen and the table was set neatly with wine glasses. Chris walked in with Amber trailing behind him, uninvited once again. My stomach turned. Amber smiled at me with that same innocent mask she always wore, but I saw the glimmer in her eyes. "I hope you don't mind, Helen," Chris said, avoiding my gaze. "Amber was passing by and I thought it would be nice if she joined us." Mind? I minded more than words could describe, but I bit my tongue, because I wanted to see how far she was willing to go. Throughout dinner, Amber acted as though she were the lady of the house. She served Chris wine before I could, she laughed at every word he spoke, and at one point, she even placed her hand on his arm in front of me as if I were invisible. That night, I cried alone in the bathroom, my sobs muffled by the sound of running water. I felt like my world was unraveling piece by piece. But in midst my pain, a fire began to burn. I realized something important. Amber was not just testing my marriage, she was testing me. She wanted to see if I would surrender, if I would give up the man I had built my life with. But I was not ready to lose everything, not to her. I began to watch Amber closely. If she wanted a game, I would play it, but on my terms. I noticed patterns in her visits. She always came when Chris was home, rarely when I was alone. She used charm and flattery like weapons, disarming him slowly, wrapping him into her web. She planted seeds of doubt, telling him how lonely she was, how she admired strong men, and how lucky some women were to have husbands who cared. It was subtle, but it was poison. One afternoon, I decided to test something. I pretended to leave for errands, but instead I parked my car a block away and walked back quietly. From the window, I saw Chris and Amber in the living room. She was sitting too close, her hand brushing his as she laughed softly. Chris did not push her away. Instead, he smiled. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep watching. Then I heard her voice, faint but sharp. "You know you deserve more, Chris. A man like you should not have to settle." That was it. That was her plan laid bare. She wanted my husband to believe that I was not enough, that I was holding him back, and that she was his future. But what she did not know is that I was not just a wounded wife. I was a woman who had endured storms, heartbreak, and loss, and I knew how to survive. If Amber wanted to play with fire, I was prepared to burn her game to ashes. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Chris had left his phone unattended one night, something he rarely did anymore. My hand shook as I picked it up, my conscience screaming against my actions, but my heart demanded answers. I opened the messages, and there it was. Her name, her words. Soon. Chris, be patient. She will not be in the way much longer. My vision blurred. I could barely breathe. She was not just after him. She wanted me gone. That night, I made a decision. I would not beg, I would not plead, and I would not fall apart. Instead, I would turn her own game against her. I would make her believe she had won, only to reveal that I had been watching, waiting, and planning all along. Amber wanted to break my marriage. She thought she could step into my home and take my husband from me, but she underestimated me. And as I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling with rage and determination flooding my veins, I whispered to myself, she will regret underestimating me, because I had just set the first piece of my revenge into motion. I did not rush. Revenge is not a race. It is a careful, cold art that requires patience, timing, and a clear head. After I found the messages on Chris's phone, I watched, I listened, and I collected. Every small slip of amber became a thread I could pull. I recorded conversations when I had a right to be in the room. I took photographs of encounters she thought were private. I saved the notes, the receipts, the little things she left behind that told the real story. For 2 months, I became a quiet storm, moving without noise while she danced in the light, believing she had already won. My plan was never to humiliate a young woman who needed help. My plan was to show the truth so plainly that there would be no room for excuses. I wanted Chris to see with his own eyes what had happened in our home. I wanted to give him the chance to choose and to show Amber that her cruelty had consequences, without resorting to cruelty of my own. I began by tightening the circle around Amber. I invited a few of our longtime friends to dinner under the pretense of a small celebration for Chris's birthday. I asked Julia, who lived across the street and had known us for decades, to bring a photo album. I asked Mark, an old colleague of Chris's, to share a story about loyalty in marriage. I did not tell them my real reasons. They came because they loved us and because, in a way, they already suspected that something was wrong. On the night of the dinner, our house smelled of lemon and rosemary. The candles were low and warm. Amber arrived late, wearing a dress that shone under the soft light. She smiled at me in those practiced, honeyed ways. Chris greeted her with the awkward tenderness of a man who has been spending too much time thinking about another woman. I watched his face like a careful surgeon watches a pulse. When dessert came, I asked Chris to help me with the album. I slid it across the table to him as if by accident. Inside the album, I had placed a single sheet of paper I knew would change everything. Copies of the messages, the folded note I had found, and a clear printout of a voicemail Amber had left on Chris's phone in which she spoke about waiting and taking what she thought she deserved. I had rehearsed nothing. It was simple. It needed to be simple. Chris opened the album and paused when he saw the paper. His fingers trembled. Amber laughed too loudly, then a little too short, as if the sound was trying to cover the coming silence. I watched the color drain from Chris's face. For a moment, I thought he would run, plead, or shout. Instead, he sat very still and read. He read the messages with a rising shame that I had never seen on him. In that quiet room, the truth had the weight of an iron bell. "Why did you keep this from me?" I asked him, my voice steady and low. There was no accusation in it. There was only the simple truth of a woman who had been betrayed. He could not answer. He looked at Amber and then back at me. Amber's practiced smile faltered. The mask slipped for a second, and what remained was raw fear. She stood up as if to leave, but the front door was between her and escape. I knew she would try to run if given the chance. That is when Julia spoke. She had always been direct. "Amber, you have been coming around the house a lot. People notice patterns. We all care about Chris. But this is not a game. It is not a prize." Amber's cheeks flushed. She tried to explain, to say that she never meant harm, that she was lonely, that Chris had been kind. She did not account for the stack of evidence on the table, for the voices I had saved, or for the witnesses who had seen her lean in and step over the lines. She stammered, and in that stammer, there was nothing but a young woman cornered by the consequences of her own choices. Chris folded the paper and looked at me. Tears streaked his face. "Helen, I am sorry," he whispered. "I was weak. I should have told you. I should have been honest." That apology felt like the opening of a locked door. I wanted to say 1,000 things, accuse him, hurt him, demand reasons. Instead, I chose the simpler path. I asked him to leave the room for a moment. I needed to speak plainly to the woman who had tried to break my home. When we were alone, Amber pleaded. She tried to blame loneliness and the loss of her father. She said she had misread affection and that she thought Chris felt the same. I listened. I felt the old ache for a lost child, for a young person who had been floundering. I also felt the clear line between sympathy and betrayal. She had crossed that line willingly. "I will not destroy a life because I'm hurting," I told her. "If you need help, I can point you to someone. If you want forgiveness, you must first stop. You must leave him alone, and you must leave our home. Do you understand?" She nodded, trembling. "Yes," she said, "I understand." I gave her one last warning that night. We would not expose her publicly if she took responsibility. I'm not a vindictive woman. I was a woman protecting everything she had built. Amber agreed to leave, and she did. That was the beginning of her retreat. But the story did not end in a single night. Wounds need time to heal, and trust needs work. Chris moved out for a short time to stay with a cousin. He needed to be away from what he had helped create so he could see it clearly. I did not want him gone forever. I wanted him to come back with his eyes open. He attended therapy. He read the things I asked him to read. He sat with his guilt and did not try to hide from it. That was the hardest part for him, to live with the knowledge of his failing and to keep showing up anyway. There were days when I questioned everything. If I had missed signs earlier, if I had been too trusting, if I had allowed a young woman to step into a place she should not have occupied. There were moments of bitter clarity when I felt the old marriage crumble and wondered if it could be rebuilt. Yet even in doubt, I clung to the lessons that pain had taught me. I learned that boundaries are not walls to keep out love. They are foundations to keep love honest. Months passed. Amber moved away to a different state to rebuild her life. She sent a short message once years later, thanking me for confronting her and for not making her shame permanent. Chris returned home slowly, carefully, and with more humility than I had seen in him in a long time. We rebuilt in small bricks. Honest conversations, weekly counseling, the return of small rituals that had made us us. There was no fairy tale. There was only two people choosing daily to be faithful in the small things that make a marriage real. If there is a lesson that I carry from this, it is this. Betrayal is not the end when truth is allowed to surface and when accountability is demanded. Strength is not vengeance. Strength is the ability to hold people accountable and still choose the path that heals rather than the path that destroys. I could have sought revenge that burned bridges and left scars on everyone involved. Instead, I chose to expose the truth and demand repair. That choice saved me from becoming what I hated. To everyone watching who has felt the slow poison of another person trying to take what is not theirs, remember this: you are not helpless. You can gather the truth, You can set boundaries, and you can choose dignity over spectacle. Do not let shame make you silent. Speak to those you trust. Protect your home. Demand honesty. Thank you for following this story. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a betrayal like this? How did you cope? Like this video if you want more stories like this. Share it with a friend. And if you are new here, please subscribe. Your support is the energy that powers this channel and keeps these stories alive.